I'm Shanice Morgan, 38 years old, and I'm a federal prosecutor with the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. At a White House reception attended by the President, the Vice President, and 200 members of the political elite, my mother, Evelyn Morgan, one of Washington's most powerful attorneys, looked directly at me and said, "Shanice, I don't know why you came. This is for the real Morgan family. You were always more employee than daughter." The East Room fell silent. The pool reporters froze with their cameras. The President's Chief of Staff was standing 6 feet away. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. My brother Blake, adopted, white, and my mother's pride and joy, laughed openly. My stepfather, Richard Morgan, the senior senator from Virginia, looked away uncomfortably but said nothing to defend me. Before I tell you what happened next, leave a comment and subscribe. That night, something inside me broke permanently. The last thread of hope that maybe, someday, they would see me as family, not as a burden, not as an obligation, not as the embarrassing reminder of my mother's past, snapped cleanly. 72 hours later, I stood at a Department of Justice podium and announced the indictment of Senator Richard Morgan on 12 counts of bribery, wire fraud, and conspiracy. 48 hours after that, I filed criminal obstruction charges against my mother. The security footage from the White House event leaked and went viral, 90 million views in 3 days. And 6 months later, the President of the United States nominated me for a seat on the United States Supreme Court. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I got here. The beginning. I was born on March 15, 1987, in Southeast Washington, D.C. The part of the city that powerful people prefer to forget exists. My mother, Evelyn Harper, was 17 years old, brilliant, and terrified. She'd just been accepted to Howard University on a full scholarship. I wasn't part of her plan. My father wasn't in the picture. To this day, I don't know his name. My mother has never told me, and I stopped asking when I was 12. For the first 5 years of my life, it was just us. We lived with my grandmother in a small apartment near Rhode Island Avenue. My mother went to Howard during the day and worked at a law office at night, filing documents and answering phones. My grandmother, Mama Ruth, took care of me. I perfectly remember my mother during those years. She was exhausted, stressed, but also fiercely determined. She'd study at the kitchen table after I went to bed, law books stacked around her like fortress walls. She graduated from Howard in 3 years instead of 4, then went straight to Georgetown Law. "We're going to make it, baby," she'd tell me. "I'm going to give you everything I never had." I believed her. Everything changed in 1994, when I was 7 years old. My mother met Richard Morgan at a Georgetown networking event. He was a Virginia state senator, recently widowed, ambitious, and looking for a wife who could help him ascend to national politics. My mother was a brilliant young attorney, beautiful, articulate, and desperate to escape Southeast D.C. They were married within 6 months. Suddenly, we lived in a Georgetown townhouse worth $2.3 million. I had my own bedroom, my first ever. I went to private school. My mother wore designer suits and pearls. But Richard had one condition. Image was everything. A black wife added diversity credibility to his political brand, but a black daughter from a previous relationship was complicated. I was a reminder that Evelyn had been poor, had made mistakes, wasn't born into their world. Richard's solution was Blake. In 1995, when I was 8, they adopted Blake Morgan, a 6-year-old white boy from a Connecticut adoption agency. Blonde, blue-eyed, photogenic, and most importantly, chosen. "This shows we're a modern American family," Richard announced at a press conference, holding Blake on his lap. "Color doesn't matter. Love matters." The cameras loved it. The voters loved it. Richard's polling numbers jumped 12 points. I stood in the background of the photo, barely visible, already learning my role. The shadow child. The erasure. The shift was immediate and brutal. Blake got the master bedroom on the 2nd floor with the bay windows overlooking the garden. I was moved to the smaller 3rd-floor room, which used to be storage. Blake got a full-time nanny, Miss Caroline, who doted on him constantly. I was expected to entertain myself after school. Blake's artwork covered the refrigerator. Mine was put in a drawer. When Richard's campaign materials featured family photos, Blake was front and center, holding Richard's hand. I was usually cropped out or positioned at the edge of the frame, barely in focus. My mother tried to justify it. "Shanice, honey, you have to understand. Politics is about perception. Blake helps us connect with a wider voter base. You're still part of this family." But I wasn't. Not really. By the time I was 10, the pattern was set. Blake was our son. I was Evelyn's daughter from before. Blake went to Sidwell Friends School, where presidents' children went. I went to a good school, but not that one. To keep you grounded in your community, they said. Blake got tennis lessons, piano lessons, and SAT tutoring from the age of 12. I got hand-me-down textbooks and library cards. When Blake struggled in math, Richard hired a Georgetown professor to tutor him 3 times a week. When I struggled in chemistry, my mother told me, "You'll figure it out. You're smart." I did figure it out. I figured out everything on my own. The teenage years high school was when the favoritism became impossible to ignore. Blake was a mediocre student, B's and C's, occasional D's in courses he didn't like. But he was charming, athletic, and white. He got into Princeton with what I later discovered were development admits, code for donations from Richard's wealthy friends. I was an excellent student, 4.0 GPA, debate team captain, National Merit Scholarship finalist. I got into Princeton on pure merit. But at the celebration dinner, Richard toasted Blake. "My son, the Princeton man, I always knew you'd make us proud." He didn't mention that I'd also been accepted. The money disparity was stark. Blake got a new BMW for his 18th birthday. I got a used Honda Civic when I was 20, and only because I needed it to commute to my work-study job. Blake's college was fully paid: tuition, room, board, spending money. I had scholarships covering most of my costs, but I still worked 20 hours a week at the university library to cover books and expenses. "You're building character," my mother told me. "Blake needs more support. He's not as naturally gifted as you." Translation: I was expected to struggle and succeed anyway, while Blake was coddled through every difficulty. But I kept going. I graduated summa cum laude from Princeton. I got into Yale Law School. I passed the bar on my first attempt. And through it all, I sent money home. The financial support. This is the part that still stings when I think about it. In 2010, when I was 23 and had just started my first job at a prestigious DC law firm, Richard's Senate campaign ran into financial trouble. A scandal involving a former aide had caused donors to pull $400,000 in funding. His campaign was $670,000 in debt, and bankruptcy would have ended his political career. Richard called me, not my mother, me. "Shanice, I know this is a lot to ask, but you're doing well at the firm. Could you help us bridge this gap? Just a loan. We'll pay you back after the election." I'd been working for 8 months. I had student loan debt. I was renting a tiny studio apartment in Adams Morgan. But I liquidated my savings, took out a personal loan, and gave them $670,000. Richard won re-election. He never paid me back. "Consider it your contribution to the family," my mother said when I asked about repayment 2 years later. "We've given you so much." In 2014, my mother decided to start her own law firm, Morgan & Associates, specializing in corporate defense litigation. She needed capital. She asked me for $3.8 million. "It's an investment," she promised. "You'll be a silent partner. When the firm succeeds, you'll make millions." I took out business loans, leveraged everything I had, and gave her the money. Morgan & Associates became one of DC's top corporate defense firms. My mother made millions. I never saw a penny in returns, never received partnership papers, never had my investment acknowledged. When I brought it up in 2018, she said, "Shanice, don't be petty. Family supports family." But when Blake ran for Congress in 2020 and needed $150,000 for his campaign, they gave it to him as a gift, not a loan. I stopped asking for fairness. I just kept working. The career I left private law practice in 2016 to join the Department of Justice as an assistant U.S. attorney. The pay cut was substantial, from $340,000 a year to $156,000. But I'd grown tired of defending corporations that poisoned water supplies and defrauded consumers. I wanted to do something that mattered. I specialized in public corruption cases, bribery, embezzlement, officials who betrayed the public trust. I was very, very good at it. By 2022, I'd secured convictions against 2 congressmen, a governor, and 14 state officials. My conviction rate was 94%, one of the highest in the Justice Department. In 2023, I was promoted to Senior Trial Counsel in the Public Integrity section. I supervised a team of 12 prosecutors. I handled the most complex, sensitive cases. My mother never acknowledged my success. At family dinners, the quarterly obligatory events I dreaded, the conversation always centered on Blake. "Blake's considering a run for governor," Richard would announce proudly. "Blake gave such a powerful speech on the House floor," my mother would gush. "Blake was featured in Politico," someone would say. When I mentioned a major conviction I'd secured, my mother would nod absently and change the subject. I still came to the dinners. I still sent birthday cards. I still called on holidays. Why? Honestly, I was holding on to the fantasy that someday they'd finally see me. Someday I'd be enough. That fantasy died at the White House. The investigation. In August 2024, an FBI whistleblower brought evidence to the Justice Department. Senator Richard Morgan had been receiving payments from Meridian Defense Systems, a military contractor, in exchange for steering procurement contracts their way. The evidence was substantial. Wire transfers totaling $2. $1 million to shell companies controlled by Richard, encrypted communications discussing specific contract values, and testimony from 3 Meridian executives willing to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. The case was assigned to me. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. But the assignment was based on expertise and clearance level, and I was the most qualified prosecutor available. I spent 3 days considering recusal. I consulted with the Deputy Attorney General. I spoke with my supervisor, Helena Rodriguez, a brilliant career prosecutor who'd become my mentor. "Shanice," Helena said carefully, "if you recuse, we'll assign someone else. But you know this case better than anyone. You know the law, you know the political landscape, and if you recuse, it will look like you're protecting him." "I'm not protecting him," I said firmly. "Then prove it." I accepted the case. For 3 months, I worked 18-hour days building the case. I reviewed 10,000 pages of financial records. I interviewed 43 witnesses. I presented evidence to a grand jury. I did not tell my family. The pressure my mother found out in November. I don't know how. Maybe Richard heard rumors. Maybe someone leaked. But one evening, my mother appeared at my apartment in Georgetown, unannounced. "We need to talk," she said, walking past me into my living room without invitation. "Mom, I'm working." "About Richard's situation," she interrupted. "I know you're involved in some kind of investigation." My blood went cold. "I can't discuss ongoing cases." "Shanice," her voice went hard, "this is family. You need to make this go away." "I can't do that, and I wouldn't even if I could." She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Do you understand what you're doing? Richard is a United States Senator. I have a law firm with 200 employees. Blake is building a political career. You're going to destroy all of that over some accounting irregularities? They're not accounting irregularities. They're felonies." "Don't be naive," she snapped. "Everyone in Washington does this. It's how the game works." "Then the game is corrupt." My mother's face twisted with something between anger and desperation. "I have given you everything. I pulled myself out of poverty to give you opportunities I never had. I married Richard so you could have a better life. And this is how you repay me?" The words hit me like physical blows, but I kept my voice steady. "You didn't marry Richard for me. You married him for you. And you didn't give me everything. I earned everything I have." She left without another word. 3 days later, I discovered that my mother had called the Attorney General, a political appointee Richard had helped confirm, and requested my removal from the case. The AG declined. Career prosecutors don't get removed because targets complain. 2 weeks later, my mother tried a different approach. She contacted 3 witnesses in my case and attempted to convince them to recant their testimony. That was obstruction of justice. I documented everything. I informed my supervisors. An internal investigation was opened into Evelyn Morgan's conduct. My family didn't know yet, but my mother wasn't just going to watch Richard go down. She was going down with him. The White House event, December 14, 2024. A White House holiday reception for congressional leadership, senior federal officials, and select members of the D.C. legal community. I was invited in my capacity as a senior DOJ prosecutor. It was a professional obligation, not a social event. I wore a navy blue sheath dress, pearl earrings, and minimal makeup. Professional, appropriate, unremarkable. I arrived at 7:00 p.m. The East Room was decorated with massive Christmas trees, thousands of white lights, and elegant gold ribbons. A Marine Corps string quartet played classical arrangements of holiday music. Servers circulated with champagne and canapes. I saw my mother immediately, impossible to miss in a scarlet Oscar de la Renta gown, holding court near the fireplace with a group of senators and their wives. Richard stood beside her in a tuxedo, laughing at someone's joke. Blake was there too, surrounded by young congressional staffers, all of them impressed by his proximity to power. I considered leaving, but Helena Rodriguez spotted me and waved me over to meet the Deputy Attorney General, who wanted to discuss an upcoming corruption case. For an hour, I avoided my family successfully. I networked professionally. I discussed case law. I pretended I belonged in this world. At 8:15 p.m., the President arrived with the First Lady. Everyone applauded. The President made brief remarks thanking everyone for their public service, specifically mentioning the dedicated prosecutors and federal agents who protect the integrity of our democracy. I felt my mother's eyes on me from across the room. At 8:45 p.m., I made the mistake of getting champagne near the refreshment table. My mother materialized beside me. "Shanice," she said, her voice cold, "I'm surprised you had the audacity to come." "I was invited," I said quietly. "It's a professional event." "Is it?" She looked me up and down dismissively. "I thought maybe you were working. You know, serving drinks or something more suited to your background." Nearby conversations stopped. People turned to look. "Mom," I started. "Don't call me that here," she hissed. "Shanice, I don't know why you came. This is for the real Morgan family. You were always more employee than daughter." The words echoed in the sudden silence. The President's Chief of Staff was 10 feet away, frozen with a champagne glass halfway to his lips. 3 pool reporters had their recording devices running. A network news producer was filming on her phone for social media content. Blake laughed, loud, performative, cruel. "Savage, Mom," he said, grinning. Richard looked uncomfortable, but said absolutely nothing. I looked at my mother, this woman who'd given birth to me, who'd once promised to give me everything she never had, who'd spent 30 years making me feel like I didn't belong in my own family. And something inside me died. Not broke. Died. The last shred of hope, the last thread of longing, the last pathetic fantasy that maybe someday they'd love me the way they loved Blake. It was gone. I smiled. To my mother's complete surprise, I smiled calmly, placed my untouched champagne glass on the table, and said, "You're right. I shouldn't be here with family. I'm here as a federal prosecutor, and we're done here." I walked out of the East Room with my head high, my posture perfect, my dignity intact. Behind me, confused whispers erupted. I didn't look back. The decision. I went directly from the White House to my office at the Justice Department. It was 9:30 p.m. on a Friday night. The building was nearly empty. My footsteps echoed in the marble hallways. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. For 20 minutes, I stared at the screen, my hands motionless on the keyboard. Then I opened my secure email and wrote to Helena Rodriguez. "Helena, I'm ready to proceed with the Morgan indictment. Schedule the press conference for Monday, December 17th at 2 p.m. I'll make the announcement personally. Additionally, I need you to review my memo regarding Evelyn Morgan's obstruction activities. I'm formally recommending prosecution. I'm done protecting people who view me as disposable. Shanice, I hit send at 9:52 p.m. Then I went home, took a long shower, and slept peacefully for the first time in months. The announcement. Monday, December 17th, 2024, 2 p.m. The Justice Department's main briefing room was packed with reporters. Every major network had cameras running. Print journalists filled the front rows. The room hummed with anticipation. Everyone knew something big was coming. The DOJ had announced only that there would be a significant public corruption announcement. Speculation had been rampant all weekend. I stood backstage, reviewing my notes one final time. I wore a charcoal gray suit, pearl earrings, my grandmother's, the only jewelry I owned that truly mattered, and minimal makeup. Helena stood beside me. "You sure about this?" "Completely. It's going to get ugly." "It already is ugly," I said calmly. "I'm just making it visible." At exactly 2 p.m., I walked to the podium. The cameras erupted in clicking and flashing. Reporters leaned forward. I looked directly into the cameras and began. "Good afternoon. I'm Shanice Morgan, Senior Trial Counsel with the Public Integrity Section of the United States Department of Justice. Today, a federal grand jury in the District of Columbia returned a 12-count indictment against Richard Morgan, United States Senator from Virginia, charging him with bribery, honest services fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy." Gasps filled the room. Reporters started shouting questions. I continued without pausing. Senator Morgan accepted approximately $2, $1 million in illegal payments from Meridian Defense Systems in exchange for using his official position to steer military procurement contracts to that company. These payments were disguised as consulting fees paid to shell companies controlled by Senator Morgan. The conduct occurred between 2019 and 2024. More questions. I ignored them. Additionally, the Justice Department is filing criminal charges against Evelyn Morgan, a prominent attorney in this city, for obstruction of justice and witness tampering. Ms. Morgan attempted to interfere with this investigation by contacting witnesses and attempting to influence their testimony. The room exploded. Every reporter was shouting now. "I want to be clear about something," I said, raising my voice slightly. "Senator Morgan is my stepfather. Evelyn Morgan is my biological mother. I have prosecuted this case because the evidence is overwhelming and because no one, regardless of their position, their political connections, or their relationship to me, is above the law." Dead silence now. The magnitude of what I was saying sank in. Justice is not a family matter. It's a public trust. I took an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the United States. That oath doesn't have exceptions for people I'm related to. I paused, looking directly into the cameras. "I will not be taking questions at this time. The indictment is public and speaks for itself. Senator Morgan and Ms. Morgan will have their day in court. Thank you." I walked off the stage to absolute chaos. The aftermath. Within an hour, the video of my announcement had 5 million views. Within 6 hours, it had 20 million. Within 24 hours, it had 53 million. But that wasn't what made it explode. 2 days after my announcement, someone leaked the White House security footage. The video was crystal clear, my mother saying, "This is for the real Morgan family. You were always more employee than daughter." Blake laughing. Richard saying nothing. Then my response, calm, dignified, devastating. "You're right. I shouldn't be here with family. I'm here as a federal prosecutor." Cut 2. Monday's press conference. Me announcing the indictment of my own stepfather and mother. The narrative wrote itself. A black woman, humiliated by her own family at the White House, then serving them federal justice 72 hours later. The video went viral beyond anything I could have imagined. 90 million views in 3 days. It was on every news network, every social media platform, every late-night comedy show. The public reaction was overwhelming. This is what integrity looks like. She chose justice over family. That's a real American hero. They treated her like the help. She treated them like criminals. Perfect. My mother and Richard were destroyed overnight. Morgan and Associates lost 32 clients within a week. Major corporations didn't want the PR nightmare of being associated with an attorney charged with obstructing justice. By January, the firm had laid off 60% of its staff. Richard was stripped of his committee assignments. The Senate Ethics Committee opened an investigation. His political career was over. Blake's congressional campaign collapsed. Donors pulled funding. His primary opponents used the footage in attack ads. This is how the Morgan family treats black women. Is this who should represent you in Congress? He lost his primary by 37 points. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Richard's defense was predictable. Everyone does it. The payments were legitimate consulting fees. The prosecution was a politically motivated witch hunt led by his vengeful stepdaughter. The jury didn't buy it. I presented 43 witnesses, 10,000 pages of financial records, encrypted messages discussing specific dollar amounts for specific contracts, and testimony from 3 Meridian executives who'd already pleaded guilty. The evidence was overwhelming. On March 24, 2025, after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 12 counts. Richard Morgan was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. My mother's obstruction trial was shorter, 8 days. She was convicted on 4 counts and sentenced to 3 years. I didn't attend either sentencing. I'd done my job. The rest was up to the judge. The call. On May 15, 2025, 5 months after the White House event, I received a call from an unknown number. Ms. Morgan, this is Chief of Staff Williams from the White House. The President would like to speak with you. Can you hold? My heart stopped. 30 seconds later, the President of the United States was on the line. Ms. Morgan, I've been following your work. What you did, choosing principle over family, integrity over comfort, that's the kind of character this country needs in its highest institutions. Thank you, Mr. President. Justice Marshall is retiring from the Supreme Court in July. I'm nominating you to fill his seat. I actually gasped. Mr. President, You're 38 years old. You're brilliant. You're fearless. And you've proven you can't be bought, threatened, or compromised. The country needs jurists like you. I'm honored, sir. The nomination will be announced Friday. Expect a fight. The opposition will come after you hard. Can you handle it? I thought about everything I'd survived, everything I'd endured, every humiliation, every dismissal, every time I'd been told I wasn't enough. Mr. President, I said calmly, I prosecuted my own mother. I can handle a Senate confirmation hearing. He laughed. I believe you can. Welcome to history, Justice Morgan. The new life. The confirmation hearings were brutal, just as promised. Opposition senators accused me of being vindictive, of using my position to settle personal scores, of lacking judicial temperament. I answered every question calmly, thoroughly, and with receipts. Senator, the evidence against Richard Morgan included testimony from 14 witnesses, 10,000 documents, and physical proof of $2. 1 million in illegal transfers. My relationship to him is irrelevant to the facts. Senator, I have prosecuted 47 public corruption cases in my career. My conviction rate is 94%. Only one of those cases involved a family member. The other 46 had nothing to do with personal relationships and everything to do with evidence. Senator, judicial temperament doesn't mean refusing to hold powerful people accountable. It means applying the law equally without fear or favor. That's exactly what I did. On July 30, 2025, the Senate confirmed me 58-42. On August 15, 2025, I was sworn in as an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. I placed my hand on my grandmother's Bible, Mama Ruth's Bible, worn and marked with decades of prayers. Chief Justice administered the oath. The President attended. Helena Rodriguez sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. My family did not attend. I didn't invite them. The encounter. In October 2025, I was giving a lecture at Georgetown Law School about ethics in prosecution. After the event, as I walked through the law school lobby, I saw her. My mother stood near the entrance, looking smaller than I remembered. She'd aged 10 years in 10 months. Her hair was grayer. Her designer suit was gone, replaced by something off the rack. She looked tired. Our eyes met. She walked toward me hesitantly. "Shanice," she said quietly. "Evelyn," I replied. I couldn't call her Mom. That word didn't fit anymore. I wanted to... She stopped, struggling. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry." For everything. For the White House. For the years before that. For not seeing you. I looked at this woman who'd given birth to me, who'd spent my entire life making me feel like I was less than Blake, like I was a burden instead of a daughter. "I accept your apology," I said calmly. "But accepting it doesn't mean things go back to how they were. They can't. I know. I wanted you to know I was proud of who you became. Despite me. Because of me," I corrected gently. "I became this person because of my own work, my own choices, my own refusal to accept your definition of my worth." She nodded, tears running down her face. "You deserved better." "I did," I agreed. "And I gave myself better. I stopped waiting for you to see me and started seeing myself." "Is there any chance?" she began. "No," I said, not unkindly. "There's no chance of going back. You have to live with the choices you made. Just like Richard does. Just like Blake does." "What about you?" she asked. "Do you have to live with what you did?" I thought about that carefully. Then I said, "I sleep perfectly well, Evelyn. I chose justice over comfort. I chose integrity over family approval. Those aren't things I regret. Those are things I'm proud of." I walked past her, out into the Georgetown evening, and I didn't look back. The reflection. My life now isn't perfect. The confirmation process was traumatic. I receive death threats regularly. Half the country thinks I'm a hero. The other half thinks I'm a vindictive daughter who destroyed her family. But I know the truth. I didn't destroy my family. My family destroyed itself through corruption, favoritism, and the arrogant belief that some people are above consequences. I just held up a mirror. The lesson I learned is this: you cannot sacrifice your integrity for people who will never value your loyalty. You cannot shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold you. And you cannot wait for validation from people who are fundamentally incapable of seeing your worth. I spent 30 years trying to earn my mother's love. I gave her hundreds of thousands of dollars. I swallowed humiliation after humiliation. I watched Blake receive everything I earned through my own merit. And it was never going to be enough, because the problem wasn't me. It was never me. Some people will look at you and see a servant, no matter how many degrees you earn, no matter how many cases you win, no matter how much you achieve. The only person who needs to see your worth is you. I am an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. I am 38 years old. I earned every single step of this journey, and I wear my crown openly now. Not the crown they tried to deny me, but the one I forged myself through excellence, integrity, and an absolute refusal to accept their diminishment. The invitation. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own integrity? Have you ever been the child who gave everything and received nothing but contempt in return? Thanks for listening to my story. Did you like it? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. See you in the next life story. With love and respect, Justice Shanice Morgan.